Categorical markers can be brought into scatter plots that have a categorical variable in addition to the two quantitative variables. What we're looking at here is just the two quantitative variables, average teacher salaries in 2013 by state, and math SAT scores, average math SAT scores in those same states. So each dot in this graph is a state. And we can see that this negative association seems to suggest that maybe paying teachers more isn't the best thing to do for improving math education and therefore improving math SAT scores. Of course, you might guess from the fact that I'm the one showing this to you that that is not going to be the final takeaway from this story. This is an observational study, right? We definitely did not have the opportunity to randomly assign teacher salaries to teachers and see what the effect is of doing that, right? But certainly one could show this graph and make the argument that, gosh, paying teachers more maybe makes them lazy, right? And then they turn out to be worse teachers, and look, here's the evidence. We see that these SAT scores go down. Okay, so we bring in Exhibit B here, where we have another variable brought in, and this is a categorical variable with the legend over here. This categorical variable is the percent of students, the percent of all students taking the SAT in that state. Now that sounds quantitative, which if that's all we said, percent of all students taking the SAT in that state, that would be quantitative, but we've defined it as below 40% and above 40% because that seems to be where the break really occurs. So that what we have here is really two different trends. There are a bunch of states that have a high percentage of students taking the SAT, and there are a bunch of states that have a relatively low percentage of students taking the SAT. So you got to think about what could be the driving factors here, right? In the states with a low percentage of students taking the SAT, there probably isn't a really big drive to try to get as many students as possible college bound and taking the SAT to see how they score on it. And that means that the students who do take the SAT are the ones who are most directed toward preparing for college, right? So when you have a low percent of students taking it, it's not a random sample of students at all. It's the ones who are really dedicated to applying to colleges, that maybe they have educated parents and their parents have supported them. Their parents are willing to drive them 2.5 hours to the nearest place that they can take the SAT and pay for the SAT and all of this stuff. Whereas these other states where we have a high percentage of students taking the SAT, it's probably the case that these states are more progressive and they have initiatives to try to get as many students as possible taking it. So here we get students that wouldn't otherwise have been necessarily college-bound students taking the SAT, and on average their scores aren't going to be as high as those ones we were describing previously. So we have overall lower SAT scores in the group where we have a higher percentage of students taking the SAT, but also look at the trend within each of these, right? Within this group here, we can see a positive association. Within this other group, we can also see a positive association. So that association only appeared to be negative when we hadn't brought in this confounding variable. And this is exactly why confounding variables are so dangerous. So that categorical variable was also a confounding variable, which made it look like our results were in fact the opposite, the exact opposite of what they really are, right? Before bringing in that confounding variable, it looked like maybe paying teachers more actually decreases the quality of education, bringing in the confounding variable and breaking it apart, we can say it does look like paying teachers more might possibly increase the quality of education in both of these groups. Of course, we still don't know if there's another 500 confounding variables going on because this is always going to be an observational study. And until someone finds a way to randomly assign various teacher salaries and then measure the effects of that, we're really not going to know the final answer on this.